Greeting and welcome to the Intensive Success Growth. I am your host, Nishant Sharma. Please give warm welcome to Jay. Jay is a storyteller and podcast host, keynote speaker. Welcome, Jay.
Thanks for having me.
Yes. So let me start with this. Where were you? What happened? Who were you surrounded with that inspired you to do what you do today?
So the short answer is I was working in politics. I was running campaigns, and that was great, but I wasn't fulfilled. And I was working with a career coach. Big shout out to career coaches. Really made a difference in my life. Who helped me realize that the reason I wasn't fulfilled is that my true passion was to help people and advocate for people who struggle with addiction like I did. And that was in the fall of 2018. I took her advice and started this business that I've been doing on the side. Before that, I took it full time in 2019, and here I am 4 years later.
Okay, great. What are the top three reasons why do people fail?
Great question. I think that there's a reluctance at times, and I'm certainly been guilty of this, of putting our full selves into the project, right? It's scary. The idea that if you put yourself out there, you may fail keeps us from, well, I'm going to do this 75%, but I'm going to do this a little bit too just in case. And, to be frank, nothing ever succeeds when you do it part-time. I mean, not part time. That's not the right word. When you don't do it all full on, that'd be a better way to say it. So I would say that'd be number one. Luck is a big part of it. I mean, luck from the ball just bouncing your way, so to speak, but also luck into where you were born and who you were born as is a big part of it. I struggled with addiction. And we are at this time in our lives and in our period where it's okay to talk about that. Even 10 years ago, it wasn't. 20 years ago, it really wasn't. And if I tried to do this work at that time, it would have been a lot harder for me. So luck is a big piece of it. And then money. Me personally, there are times when I'm real short in terms of money, even though I'm doing a good thing. The hugs and love can't pay the bills. So money would be a big part of it.
Yes, great. So, what are your top three success secrets that other can model from you?
So I would say number one is put yourself out there. I work so hard to find opportunities like this one to speak to awesome people like you, mostly because I love talking about these topics, right? They're very important to me. But also, you never know, right? You never know when this has literally happened to me. Someone would call me or email me and say, I saw you on this interview 3 months ago. At the time, it didn't really click. But since then, I've been thinking about this point you made. Would love to talk to you about this opportunity, right? That's happened. So putting yourself out there is so important. Number two is, you know, kind of silly, but doing the work. I again been guilty of this myself. Of if I'm not all the way in on a project and I kind of do it only mediocre, the client knows and the client isn't happy. And if we're not making the client happy, those of us who do this kind of work, it's for naught because they're not going to recommend us to other opportunities. So I would say that's number two. And then number three is make sure you're passionate about what you're doing because it makes those other two things way easier. If you care about this, if you're putting your full self in it, you're going to do a better job and you're going to be willing to take some leaps.
Okay. What's your company motto?
Well, it's literally the name of the company, Choose Your Struggle. And what that means basically is look, uh, put yourself out there, fight the fight that you want to fight, and don't be bothered by the noise. Stay focused and choose your struggle.
Okay, okay, great. So, who is your ideal client?
Hmm. Probably somebody who has a really incredible story to tell and hasn't had the platform or the opportunity to tell it. I just got done working with an organization. Actually, I'm wearing their shirt right now, Savage Sisters, who the founder started this nonprofit to help people struggling with addiction. when she was in her hospital bed after going through trauma, struggling with addiction herself. The story was incredible. I heard it and I said, I got to tell this story. So I talked to the woman who started this nonprofit, and the podcast. It was 10 months of work. It just dropped last week and it's going gangbusters. People from all over the world have reached out to say, this is incredible. I've never heard a story like this. That was a perfect storm. It was a great story. I had access because it's here in my hometown, or my city of Philadelphia. I'm also in recovery, so I could talk the talk and walk the walk, and it paid off. So those opportunities just they don't come along that often, and when they do, you gotta grab them.
Okay. So how do you find your ideal client?
Yeah, so going back to my earlier point, you just got to put yourself out there. Perfect example. As we're recording this weekend, I'm going to this event. Between you and me, I don't really want to go. It's not really something I'm looking forward to. But somebody reached out to me from this podcast and said, I heard it. I think that these people would really get a kick out of it. Would you come and just talk to some people about it? It's sort of one of those stuffy events that I don't really love doing. But if the opportunity is there to meet some people who want to tell their story, and especially the kind of stories I like to tell, then I'll go. So, it's just putting yourself out there and making sure that you're always ready to talk the talk.
Okay. Do you use social media to grab the client?
Yeah, although it's becoming increasingly harder. I mean, we're all on it all the time. And, me telling a good story is no longer a thing that's going to rise to the top. We scroll so quickly, and I'm guilty of this like anybody else. A cute dog, a beautiful woman, a cool car. These are the things that people are clicking on a lot quicker than a story that may be interesting, because then they got to go and follow that. Okay, this post was cool, but how do I go listen to the story? So it's a lot harder these days to rise to the top on social media.
Okay. How do you deliver five-star client experience?
Yeah, man, that's not always easy. And it's not always easy because clients sometimes want what they want, but don't understand exactly how that may happen, I think would be a good way to say it. So, perfect example. I worked with a client back when I was coaching more. I don't really coach as much anymore because I'm too busy doing this other stuff, but they wanted their child to stop using drugs, which is great. I mean, if that's what you want, I get it, but they weren't willing to have the conversations themselves with their child. They wanted me to do it, and I had to be like, look, I'm happy to talk with them. Obviously, that's what you're hiring me for. But at the end of the day, like, this is your son. You gotta work with it. Like, I can't do it for you, and so that can be really difficult sometimes. But listening to what the client wants and helping them understand, this is what I'm hearing you say. Is it possible that this is really what you want? Kind of helping them get to the finish line. That's the best way to do
Okay. How do you handle rejections?
it. um, So I spent 10 years before doing the work I do now in nonprofit and political fundraising. And when you do that, you get used to the word no. You get it a lot. And so my first fundraising job was dialing for dollars, as we say, where you get a bunch of numbers and you call them and you have to make your pitch over the phone real quick before they hang up on you. And it is the best way to get over the fear of rejection because you get 100 no's for every yes. So at this point, am I still, yeah, nobody likes hearing a no, nobody likes being rejected, but it doesn't get me the way that it did before I did that work.
Okay, okay. So great. How do you crush your competition?
How do I?
Crush your competition.
Oh man, that's funny. I tend to think of it less as crushing my competition and more, you know, if I can work with my competition, that's better, right? Because, and this is, I've done this before where I've gone like, all right, this person's getting this job that I really want. They've beaten me out a couple of times. I know I'm better at this thing than they are. What if I work with them and say, look, you're doing a great job with this. You're not as good as that, let's be honest, but I am. Let's see if we can work together. And that's worked occasionally. If they will not work with me, and sometimes they're kind of a jerk about it, then I don't feel bad trying to beat them out for the next one, right? But I try to do that legwork first to see if we can work together before I say, all right, screw you, I'm gonna take that next one.
Okay. How do you start your day?
I start my day with having breakfast with my wife and our our dog sitting right there. That's always really important to me. And listening to my favorite podcast while I'm just kind of getting organized for the day before when I'm figuring out what I'm gonna do. I like that style of learning in the morning. Listening to something that's gonna teach me a little bit. I think it gets my brain going, and sometimes it even gets me motivated to I have a blog and all that kind of stuff. It gets me motivated to write something. So I definitely recommend that to everybody, whether it's reading a book or putting a podcast on, or not the news, so to speak, but something that is actually educational and gets your brain working in the morning. That's my great piece of advice.
Okay, great. So what are you grateful for today?
Oh man, very very grateful. Excuse me, for my wife. We have a great relationship. I'm very thankful for her. I'm thankful for the second chance that I got as a guy in recovery in a world where, frankly, too many people, don't even get their first chance. I'm getting a second, right? And I am grateful for that all the time, and it's why I dedicate myself to this work, because I quite frankly shouldn't be here. And if I was less lucky than I am, less privileged than I am, I wouldn't be. So, it's hard. I'm not always excited that I'm underpaid and that, some months are good and some months are bad. But then when I step back and say, but I'm doing good work, and I'm doing the thing that I'm passionate about, it's a lot easier.
Okay, okay. So great. How young are you?
I'll be 36 in 2 months.
Okay, you are not 36 year young. You are 18 years young with 18 years experience.
That's well put. Yeah.
So who is your living mentor and what's the impact?
Ooh. Um. So I would say that he's there's a guy that I really look up to. Well, so two people. Number one, I've learned so much from my dad growing up. He's a really interesting, smart guy, and I've been very lucky to learn from him. So in terms of a mentor I've actually got to work with, he is definitely the one. But there's a man by the name of Carl Hart, who is the head of the psychology department at Columbia Law School in New York, and he recently wrote a book called Drug Use for Grown-Ups. It's really challenging a lot of what the misinformation about drug use. He's a scientist who's done a lot of research to try to show that the way we talk about drugs, the way we understand addiction, is just wrong. And I agree with a lot of what he's saying. And when I work hands-on in the drug use community and the addiction community, I see a lot of his ideas at play. So I got to meet him not long ago. He's a really amazing guy, and so gotta give a shout out to Dr. Carl Hart.
Okay, okay. What's your favorite book?
That's a great question. Man, it really depends on when you're asking, but I just mentioned, drug use for grown-ups is great. Chasing the Scream by Johan Hari about the war on drugs is fantastic. I've read the book On the Road by Jack Kerouac countless times. Slaughterhouse Five by Kurt Vonnegut. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams. Man, East of Eden by John Steinbeck. I'm a big reader, so shout out to a lot of those.
Okay. What do you want to remember for?
I think that I'm less worried about, people remembering me and more about the impact, right? If people if I had an impact with my life, if less people struggled with addiction, if less people were struggling with the stigma around drug use and addiction, it will be a life well lived. And if I got to live happy with, my wife and in the life that we try to live, that's a life well lived.
Okay. How can we support you?
Well, so right now, as I was telling you before we started recording, I had a giant project. I mentioned this briefly that just dropped 10 days ago as we record this, called Choose Your Struggle Presents Made It Season 1 Stay Savage. It's a 10-part documentary podcast series about this nonprofit here in Philadelphia. So you can check that out. Check out my other podcast, Choose Your Struggle, all that kind of stuff. Also, if you're looking for someone to help you tell a story, whether it's a podcast series or, whatever, like that's what I do is I help people tell their story in a good way. I'm looking right now for my next big project. So reach out and we'll chat.
Okay. What would you like to say about your guest experience on the show?
Well, I'll tell you what, man, you are to the point. You're right there, and I appreciate that. I do a lot of these. I've been on over 200 or so of these shows myself, and sometimes they meander and we don't really talk about that much, and yours is not that. You're like, let's do it, let's get right to it. So props to you for that.
Okay. What's your final word?
So I would say that, at the end of the day, man, if everybody is choosing their struggle, then we're all going to be a little bit happier. There's a lot of noise out there trying to get us to care about 50,000 things at once. And look, I get it. The world can be a flaming dumpster fire at times, right? But if we're all caring about everything at the same time, then we're not working on anything. So figure out where your passions lie, figure out what's important to you and what you're good at, and work on that. And that's how we make the world a better place.
Okay. Thanks, Jay, for sharing your wisdom with us on the behalf of our team and community. We really appreciate you. Until the next time, all good wishes to you.
Thank you for having me.